The wedding hall, Seoul, 6:58 p.m. The music swelled. Kang Min-ho stood at the altar in a black tuxedo, jaw tight, heart somewhere else entirely. Then the doors opened and there she was, not his bride, Amaka. Curves wrapped in green ankara, 3 small children clutching her hands, eyes locked on his like twin blades. The room froze. So did he. Welcome to Afro-Korean romance, where love has no borders. If you believe in love, please like, share, and subscribe for more Afro-Korean romance stories. 5 years earlier, Kang Min-ho had been a different man, younger, hungrier, not yet crowned head of the Kang conglomerate's shadow empire. He met Amaka Chukwu in Lagos at a shipping negotiation gone wrong. She was the translator hired to smooth tempers between his family's company and hers. She refused to be intimidated by his cold stare or his bodyguard's silence. "You don't scare me," she'd said, arms crossed, chin lifted. Something in his chest had cracked open right there. They married in secret 6 months later, a small ceremony on a beach in Lagos, no cameras, no consent from his father. For a year they were happy. Then his father discovered the marriage, called it a disgrace to the Kang name, and gave Min-ho an ultimatum. Leave her or lose everything: the company, his mother's medical care, his brother's freedom from debts their father controlled. Min-ho left. He told himself it was to protect her from a war she hadn't signed up for. He never told her the real reason. She never forgave the silence. Now, 5 years later, staring at her across the wedding hall he'd built his whole life around avoiding, Min-ho understood. He hadn't escaped anything. He'd only been waiting. The following morning, Min-ho canceled the wedding to his intended bride, CEO, a marriage his father had arranged for merger purposes. The scandal hit the papers by noon. Kang heir abandons bride at altar. He didn't care. He was already at the hotel where Amaka was staying, banging on her door. "Open it, Amaka." "Away, Min-ho." Her voice cracked through the wood, exhausted, guarded. "Until I see them. Not until you tell me the truth." Door opened. Behind her, 3 children, a boy and 2 girls, maybe 4 years old, peered out from the bed, wide-eyed, unmistakably his. Same sharp brow, same stubborn mouth. Min-ho's knees nearly buckled. "They're triplets," Amaka said quietly, arms folded protectively across her chest. "Born 8 months after you left. I didn't chase you down to tell you. You made your choice clear enough." That evening, after the children were asleep, Min-ho sat across from Amaka in the hotel's small kitchenette, hands wrapped around cooling tea he hadn't touched. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you," he said. "My father threatened everything: your visa, your family's shipping contracts, my mother's hospital bills. I thought if I disappeared, he'd leave you alone." "You thought wrong," Amaka said, voice tight. "He found me anyway, sent men to scare me out of Seoul. I raised 3 children alone in Lagos, terrified every day someone from your world would come finish the job." Min-ho's hands curled into fists on the table. "Give me names, tonight." "This isn't your fight to inherit again, Min-ho." "They're my children," he said, low and dangerous. "That makes it exactly my fight." Few days later, Min-ho moved Amaka and the children into a guarded penthouse without asking permission, because he knew she'd refuse, and because he could no longer stomach the thought of them unprotected for one more night. Amaka arrived to find toys already arranged in 3 small rooms, painted in the colors she'd once mentioned loving during a conversation 5 years ago that he'd apparently never forgotten. "You remembered," she whispered, throat tight, staring at the mint-green walls of the smallest room. "Remember everything," Min-ho said, standing in the doorway, voice rough. "Every word, every color. I just failed to act on any of it when it mattered." She wanted to stay angry. It was harder every day. By the end of the week, whispers churned through Seoul's elite circles. CEO, the abandoned bride, wasn't finished. At a charity gala Min-ho was forced to attend for business optics, she cornered Amaka near the bar, venom wrapped in silk. "Foreign nanny playing house with triplets," CEO sneered, eyes raking over Amaka's dress. "How long before he tires of you again?" Amaka's spine straightened. "I raised his children alone for 5 years without his name or his money. I don't need your permission to exist in this room." Across the hall, Min-ho watched, jaw clenched, moving through the crowd like a blade cutting silk. He reached them just as Seo-yeon's hand grazed his sleeve, feigning old intimacy. "Touch her," he said to Seo-yeon, not raising his voice, "and don't ever speak to my wife again." Word wife landed heavier than either woman expected, including him. Later that night in the car home, Amaka finally cracked. "Why did you say that? We never divorced," Min-ho said quietly, eyes on the road, knuckles pale on the wheel. "I checked the paperwork years ago. I never signed it. I couldn't." Amaka stared at him, something fragile shifting behind her eyes. "You've been legally married to me this whole time." "Yes." He finally looked at her, and the mask he wore for the world fell away completely. "I never stopped being yours. I was just too much of a coward to prove it." Children changed everything between them, softened the war into something more dangerous: tenderness. Min-ho learned their names properly now, memorized which twin liked her rice with extra sesame oil, which one couldn't sleep without a specific stuffed elephant, which son sang under his breath the way Amaka once had. He showed up to every dinner, every bath time, every bedtime story, a mountain of a man kneeling on tiny beds, voice gentle as a lullaby. "Good with them," Amaka admitted one evening, arms crossed as she watched from the doorway, guard slipping. "I missed 5 years," Min-ho said, not looking up from tucking in their daughter. "I intend to make up every single day of it." Something in Amaka's chest, long frozen, began dangerously to thaw. The catalyst came on a stormy Thursday night. One of the children spiked a sudden fever, and panic tore through the penthouse. Min-ho carried his son through the rain to the hospital himself, refusing every driver, every guard, cradling the boy against his chest like something breakable and infinitely precious. Amaka ran behind him, soaked, terrified, and in that chaos, watching this powerful, feared man fall apart over a sick 4-year-old, something inside her broke open completely. Hours later, with the fever finally down and the boy sleeping peacefully, Min-ho collapsed into a hospital hallway chair, head in his hands, shoulders shaking silently. "I can't lose them," he choked out. "I can't lose any of you. Not again." Amaka knelt in front of him, cupping his face, rain and tears mixing on both their skin. "You won't," she whispered. "I'm here, we're here." That night back at the penthouse, exhaustion and relief and 5 years of unspoken longing collided. Min-ho pulled her close in the doorway of her room, forehead pressed to hers, breath ragged. "Don't deserve a second chance," he murmured, "but I am begging for one anyway. Me love you the way I should have from the beginning. Let me try." Distance between them dissolved into something wordless, a slow, breathless closeness neither fought anymore, the kind of surrender 5 years of silence had been building toward. The door closed softly behind them, and the rest belonged only to them. Morning came gray and quiet. Amaka woke wrapped in Min-ho's arms, and instead of warmth, panic seized her chest. What if this was temporary? What if he wakes up and remembers all the reasons he left before? Before he stirred, she slipped away, dressed, and left a note on the kitchen counter. "I need air. Don't follow me." He found the note 20 minutes later. His blood went cold. "Find her," he barked at his head of security, voice shaking with a fear far more violent than any boardroom rage. "Find her now." He didn't wait for his men. Min-ho searched himself, every cafe she used to mention loving, every quiet park, every corner of Seoul that might remind her of home. He found her 3 hours later on a bench overlooking the Han River, arms wrapped around herself, eyes red. He didn't yell. He sat beside her, silent, until she finally spoke. "I'm scared," Amaka whispered. "Scared that last night meant nothing. Scared you'll wake up one day and remember I'm not the woman your world thinks you deserve." Min-ho turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "You are not a mistake I need protecting from. You are the only thing in 29 years of my life that ever made sense. I'm not leaving. Not this time. Not ever." Peace lasted exactly 4 days. Investigators Min-ho had quietly hired traced the source of the years-old threats against Amaka back to his own father, Chairman Kang Min-ho, who, upon learning of the triplets and Min-ho's public declaration, saw not grandchildren but a liability to 5 generations of pure Kang lineage and reputation. Furious calls escalated into a chilling ultimatum delivered by the chairman himself at Min-ho's office. "Send her back to Africa with the children, quietly, generously compensated," the old man said, cold as stone. "Or I destroy everything you've built protecting her." Min-ho stood, fists on his desk, voice ablade. "You threatened her once. You will not get a second chance. I am done being your obedient son." "Careful, boy," Chairman Kang warned. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." That night, Amaka was taken. She'd gone to pick up medicine for one of the twins, guards trailing a careless half-step behind. A black van cut them off outside the pharmacy. By the time Min-ho's security reached the scene, she was gone, phone shattered on the pavement, one shoe left behind in the street. Min-ho received the call at midnight. The phone slipped from his hand. For one suspended second, the feared, composed CEO the tabloids wrote about vanished completely, replaced by something ancient and merciless. "Get me every camera in a 5-kilometer radius," he said, voice deadly quiet. "And get me my father, now." His father denied involvement, but Min-ho didn't need a confession. He had resources his father had forgotten he possessed. Loyalty built over years, favors owed by men more dangerous than the chairman himself. By 3 a.m., one of his father's former enforcers, a man named Do Hyun who'd once idolized Min-ho's late mother, called with a location. A warehouse outside Incheon, owned through 3 shell companies that all trace back to Kang Sung-ho's private accounts. Do Hyun said quietly over the phone, "Your father wanted her scared, gone from Korea, not hurt, but the men he hired aren't known for restraint." Min-ho was already moving, coat half on, voice a low growl to his driver. "Then we arrive before restraint runs out." The warehouse was cold, dimly lit, smelling of salt and rust. Amaka sat bound to a chair, chin lifted despite the terror clawing her chest, refusing to let the 2 men guarding her see her break. She thought of her children. She thought of Min-ho's voice the night before, promising forever. She held onto that thread and did not let go. The door exploded open at 4 a.m. Min-ho walked in like judgment itself, flanked by 4 men, eyes locked only on her. The guards reached for weapons. Min-ho's men moved faster, more decisive, years of quiet preparation finally unleashed. Within 90 seconds it was over. Min-ho crossed the room and dropped to his knees in front of her, hands trembling as he undid the ropes. "I'm here," he said, voice breaking. "I'm here, I'm so sorry, I'm here." Amaka collapsed into him, finally allowing herself to shake. "You came." "I will always come," he said fiercely, pressing his lips to her hair. "Always." The fallout was swift and merciless. With evidence in hand, shell company records, Do Hyun's testimony, security footage placing his father's known associates at the scene, Min-ho didn't hesitate. He called an emergency board meeting the next morning and, in front of the entire Kang family and shareholders, laid out his father's crimes. The years-old threats against Amaka, the kidnapping, the attempted destruction of his own grandchildren's safety for the sake of appearances. "I built half this company's success on your name," Min-ho said, voice ringing through the silent boardroom, "but I will not build my family's future on your cruelty. Effective immediately, I'm invoking Clause 14 of the Founders' Charter. You're removed as chairman." Board, long weary of the old man's iron grip, voted unanimously to support him. By the end of the month, Kang Min-ho stood as chairman himself, not through inheritance but through his father's own downfall, and through the quiet, unshakable resolve of a man who had finally chosen love over legacy. The scandal dominated headlines for a week, then faded as scandals do into old news. What remained was steadier. Min-ho arriving home every evening without fail, kneeling to greet 3 small voices shouting "Appa." At the door, Amaka watching from the kitchen with a smile she no longer fought. "Different now," she told him one night, resting her head against his shoulder as the children slept. "I finally know what I almost lost twice," Min-ho murmured against her hair. "I don't intend on a 3rd chance." He proposed properly on a quiet evening by the Han River, the same bench where he'd found her weeks earlier, terrified and running. This time, he knelt not out of fear but certainty, a small velvet box trembling slightly in his steady hands. "We're already married in every way that matters," he said. Voice thick with emotion, "but I want to marry you again, properly, publicly, unafraid. I want the whole world to know Amaka Chukwu chose me, and I intend to spend every day left proving I deserve it." Amaka, tears slipping freely down her cheeks, could only nod, laughing through the emotion. "Yes. God, yes." 6 months later, Seoul's largest cathedral overflowed with flowers, white orchids from Korea, vibrant hibiscus flown in from Lagos, a wedding that finally honored both halves of the family they'd built. Their triplets, now healthy and radiant, served as ring bearers and flower girl, giggling down the aisle ahead of their mother. When Amaka appeared at the doors this time, there was no shock, no frozen dread, only Min-ho's face breaking into the softest smile Seoul high society had ever witnessed from the once untouchable air, tears openly falling as she walked toward him. "No more running," he whispered as she reached him. "No more hiding," she whispered back. 1 year later, in a nursery painted the same soft mint green as their first home together, Min-ho held his newborn daughter against his chest, the fourth addition to a family once nearly destroyed by fear and pride. Amaka watched from the bed, exhausted, radiant, utterly at peace. "5 years ago, I thought love had a border," Min-ho murmured, pressing a kiss to his daughter's forehead. "Turns out it just needed the right person brave enough to cross it." Amaka reached for his hand, threading their fingers together, home finally settling into every corner of her heart. "Welcome home, Min-ho," she whispered. "Welcome home," he echoed. "Finally."